For a small regional companies or family-owned business, how do I think about that? Well, that's simplification on an everyday basis. Everything requires human coordination and routine. We either need to automate it, simplify it, but I always recommend people first simplify, standardize before you automate. The last thing you want to do is to automate complexity. We don't want to do that.
Drage dame i gospodo, dobar dan i dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Liderova podcasta ovdje na Future Tense konferenciji. S nama je trenutno Howard Yu, Lego profesor menadžmenta i inovacija s kojim ćemo razgovarati o nekoliko zanimljivih tema u sljedećih 10 do 15 minuta. Howard, it's nice to meet you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So how do you like Zagreb so far?
Oh, it's beautiful. The moment I landed, it was so lush and green, and it didn't rain. So I went out for a run, so I enjoyed the city.
Okay, that's great. So let's start with the conversation. You argue that the best companies reinvent themselves before they have to. What are the signals leaders should watch to know if it's the right time?
Right. In our research, what we have observed is it's never about not able to see. It's almost like we are not able to act on the knowledge that we know ahead of time. So I think it's quite obvious what is needed from an organization point of view. Today, people talk about Gen AI, but roll back 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? If you're retailing a brand, omni-channel, of course, people talk about that. Before we talk about prescriptive data, people talk about big data. Guess what? Omni-channel, big data analytics, these are the foundational work to take leverage on Gen AI today. So I think people kind of know the urgency and the need, but the real challenge for organization is how do we mobilize everyone so that we march in the right direction together rather than just having one or two futurists out there.
How do you think the future of business is going to look like?
I think with the world is going on, obviously, the whole notion of a globalized market is over. It's not just consumer taste is going to branch out and fracture. A trade route is going to fracture and change. But it's also the foundational technological standard. We are really on the point in time as we see there would be emerging competing standards that dominate whether it's not just China, but Southeast Asia or the China orbit. North America, Canada, Mexico, for instance, and Europe would need to find its own way. So for organization, multinational, is how do we navigate this complexity, both technology and regulation and market, at the same time? So that, I think, is the biggest major shift going forward.
In your research, what separates companies that truly innovate from those who only claim to innovate?
So in our research, what we do is we try to develop a balanced scorecard. We're looking at the revenue growth, profit growth, at the same time looking at the investment in R&D, product pipeline. But one thing we really trace is the scalability. And this is where you could see those who are talking and those who are doing. Because it's not enough to do innovation theater. What we try to match is when a company truly innovate, can those new innovation, whether it's AI or previously, say, mobile service, mobile payment, they actually scale from one country to the next, and then to the next. So I think that scalability ultimately is the litmus test, whether an organization just talk and show versus those who are doing the real work.
Yeah, so you showed me innovation, now show me real change and profitability, right?
Right. So those are the short-term measure, obviously, profitability, top-line growth, Wall Street, stakeholders, even when your family-owned businesses, right? The cash flow, these are really important. But like you said, we also must pay attention to the leading indicator on R&D expenditure, market advertisement investment, for instance. But ultimately, it's also whether an organization have the capacity when you try an experiment, when it works, can they bring it up to the marketplace quick enough, fast enough?
Can you share maybe an example of a legacy company that successfully redefined its core capabilities and what others can maybe learn from it?
Yeah. So I'll give you example of really big company, and then I'll bring it down to whether this is a national, a hotel chain, or I'm just an independent cruise line. How do we think about that? So if you looking at the world of finance, payment company, the largest one these days is Visa and MasterCard. And I remember 20 years ago, people kind of write off MasterCard already because they don't own consumer data. They are the intermediaries, it's the big banks that issue cards to consumer. But if you're looking at profit growth and revenue growth and new product launch, boy, these guys are just a powerhouse. What I've learned is MasterCard cannot just win in the US. MasterCard cannot just win in Europe. They need to win in Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa, all the way to China. So
Globally.
To me, this is the prime example of how you could overcome fractured world. What they did, simplification every day. You simplify your internal communication so that everyone operate, some people call modular organization. I'll take away the terminology. Think about your company becomes Lego bricks. Whatever consumer needs, you pull in these Lego bricks of different offering, damn, you go. For different market to satisfy local regulation, etc. I think this is the future. So for a small regional companies or family-owned business, how do I think about that? Well, that's simplification on an everyday basis. Everything requires human coordination and routine. We either need to automate it, simplify it, but I always recommend people first simplify, standardize before you automate. The last thing you want to do is to automate complexity. We don't want to do that.
Howard, tell me, how should companies manage the balance between exploring new technologies, for example, AI, and exploiting their current strengths?
Yeah. Unless you're a technology company seriously, you have to think about not inventing new technology, but it's pioneer application of new technology in your own world. I'll give you a very concrete example, right? Because for a lot of family-owned business, say, you are not in the business trying to become like NVIDIA or Microsoft in AI. All you need is to deploy these new technology and find new application into your own very quirky way. If I'm managing a chain of local hotel in a specific region, maybe the way I deploy it is not about social media footages. Maybe it's about so that the community with my local stakeholders, we can draw tourists in a different season so that we avoid over tourism in a certain spot. Now, no open AI or technology firm can tell you how to do it. You need to figure it out. And I think this is so exciting because which means we all have a role to play.
And in the end, Howard, tell me, what role do you believe emerging economies will play in driving global innovation in the next decade?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the global news, actually, this is a little dangerous of we obsess with just the US tech companies, right? I was born and raised in Hong Kong. And I remember when I was growing up, a lot of these like jobs moved to China already. And today in 2025, what you see is it's not about the manufacturing job. People get the wrong headline. Obviously, this is still huge. You're looking at BYD and all these manufacturer, right? But the next phase is really on the technology stack like DeepSeek for large language model. They are giving it away for free. OpenAI charge a license quite substantially. What do this mean? For emerging economy, they're going to go for the free option. So if history is a guide, that disruptive model, oftentimes coming out from China, whether it's DeepSeek, whether it's Huawei as well, they are building server and AI capabilities using basically handicapped chipset, right? And they are going indigenous using local cluster of industrial base in China. I think for the emerging economy, because the price point is so much lower, they becomes the only alternative because emerging economy find it quite hard to afford the Western world type of perfection of product. They're great, but too expensive.
Yeah. And people don't have the money.
And people don't have the money. And history told us any good enough product, over time they become better and better. And this is how Huawei, once upon in time, basically dethroned Nokia and Ericsson in telco product categories, right? So what we're seeing right now as things evolve is how this player from DeepSeek to Manus sort of like a little bit of a joke at this moment, and it's never really as good as OpenAI. But for those who couldn't afford, that is the route to market to bring benefit in Africa, in India, Bangladesh, Latin America. This would be only alternative.
Howard, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dame i gospodo, bila je još jedna epizoda Liderova podcasta u sklopu Future Tense konferencije ovdje u Zagrebu. Napravili smo cijelu YouTube playlistu sa svim epizodama, njih 11, a dostupna je s jednostavnim klikom na ovaj link. Naravno, na Liderovom kanalu je puno drugih sadržaja, od fintech talksa do klasičnih Lider podcast epizoda, tako da uživajte i vidimo se opet.